With the passing of Pope Francis, the Vatican is now racing against time to carry out a series of critical tasks. Without precise coordination, the situation could quickly spiral into chaos or worse. Having endured centuries of turbulent moments, the Vatican has learned from experience and put in place meticulous protocols to manage this delicate transition. Every action is timed down to the day and hour confirming the Pope's death, transferring his body to St. Peter's Basilica, and preparing for the conclave to elect his successor. The very first priority is to officially verify that the Pope has indeed passed away. In earlier times, Vatican officials would confirm the Pope's death directly at his bedside. Today, however, the process takes place in his private chapel. There, the Cardinal Camerlengo, who oversees the Holy See's property and finances, steps in to temporarily lead the Vatican until a new Pope is elected. This crucial duty is guided by a tradition known as the Silver Hammer Protocol. Historically, the protocol involved tapping the deceased Pope's forehead gently with a small silver hammer while calling his baptismal name 3 times. The idea was simple yet symbolic. If there was no response to the hammer's tap, it was confirmation that the Pope had truly departed from this world. At the very least, the silver hammer continued to be utilized until the early 20th century, when Leo III passed away with the year 1903. You might be happy to learn that it has not been used against Pope Francis, despite the fact that it may have remained in place, despite the fact that John Paul III passed away 60 years later. The Camerlengo, who is currently Kevin Cardinal Farrell, continued to yell out, "George, are you dead?" A total of 3. Since it was clear that George was not responding, Cardinal Farrell answered by saying, "I declare that His Holiness Pope Francis is truly dead." However, in order to be absolutely certain, the Camerlengo can proceed with an instrument that is not a hammer, but rather an ECG. In 2005, this was the method by which the death of John Paul II was verified by scientific evidence. As soon as it was determined that Pope Francis had passed away, his body was immediately placed in an open coffin. Nonetheless, this is a relatively new development. Are you old enough to recall the funeral that was held for John Paul II? His body would have been visible to you. In what is known as a canaletto, sometimes known as a deathbed, it was placed in an elevated bier. Additionally, Pope Benedict XVI was assigned to one. But in November of 2024, Pope Francis altered the concept from what it had been, "In a moment more, on it." For the time being, the Camerlengo and his men got to work immediately sealing the Apostolic Palace and taking care of the Pope's possessions in order to prevent any thefts from occurring about it. The origins of this practice can be traced back to earlier times, when the likelihood of someone stealing the possessions of the newly deceased Pope was significantly higher than it is today. In spite of this, there are some things that are destroyed on purpose in order to maintain the credibility of the Pope's office. The first thing that would have been taken away would have been the fisherman's ring. According to what you can see, this is how it appeared in the past. As was the case with all popes who came before him, Francis wore a special ring that was used to affix the seal to official papers. Even while it might not seem like much now, official seals were quite important in the past in order to ensure the legitimacy of papers, and the Vatican continues to uphold this historic practice. For the sake of preventing possible forgeries, Cardinal Farrell ordered Francis's ring destroyed. The same silver hammer that was used to tap deceased popes on the head was responsible for the destruction up until it was recently discovered. However, it's possible that things have changed now. Benedict XVI's ring was not crushed in when he abdicated in 2013, but rather it was chopped apart and it was arranged in the shape of a cross for convenience. Regardless of the circumstances, Cardinal Farrell was the one who destroyed the ring in the company of other cardinals of great rank. It is vital to have witnesses who can attest to the fact that this ring was in fact destroyed. From this point forward, all documents that are sealed in that manner are considered to be forgeries. In addition, the lead seal that the Pope had used was ruined. Every other piece of property is either archived, donated, or in exceedingly rare instances, made available to the heirs of the Pope. After taking precautions to ensure the safety of the deceased person's body and other essential objects, the Vatican is now in the process of making preparations for the period of public mourning. However, they did not all wish to accomplish this in the same manner. It is customary for the body of the Pope to be embalmed. Formalin, which is a solution of formaldehyde, and methanol was used to embalm John XXIII, who is considered to be the most prominent example of this in contemporary times. A remarkable amount of preservation was found in his body after it was unearthed in the year 2001. Cardinal Virgilio Noy, who was serving at the time, stated that it appeared as though he had passed away just the day before. However, immunization is not required in any way. He made the decision not to be embalmed, John Paul II. For Francis, the answer will be determined by his own individual preferences. The presence of Swiss guards who will accompany the Pope on his final journey from the Apostolic Palace to St. Peter's Basilica will be required. This will be the case since the Pope requires their presence. Since the year 1506, when Julius II made the request for their presence, the Swiss guards have been providing protection to the Pope. In death, that does not come to an end. Throughout the day and night, the guards stand vigil with their spikes and heavy armor, ensuring that the Pope's body is protected. In a fairly recent instance, the Swiss guards refused to leave Benedict XVI nor niece's side after the lights in St. Peter's were ordered to be turned out. This displayed their unwavering commitment to their duties without question. It is likely that they recalled the year 1527 when 147 Swiss guards gave their lives in order to protect Pope Clement VII from 20,000 assailants who were working for Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. There is little doubt that they will continue to stand by Francis' side throughout these days as well. But to be more specific, where will he be? A cypress coffin, a lead coffin, and an oak coffin were the three types of coffins that were utilized before until quite recently. However, Francis, who is known for his modesty, deemed this to be an excessively extravagant act. As a result, his body was placed in a straightforward wooden coffin that was lined with zinc. This coffin will be presented to the public in St. Peter's for a period of 3 days. The final journey that the Pope will make to his final resting place will take place on day 4. In St. Peter's, a significant number of the popes are still interred. A necropolis, which can be translated as a city of dead, can be found beneath it. Since it was unlawful for Romans to bury their dead inside the walls of the old city, they would do so in this necropolis that was located outside of the walls. Would you be surprised to learn that the current location of St. Peter's Church is situated precisely on top of one of them? In contrast to the majority of popes, Francis will not be laid to rest in the Vatican's tomb. St. Mary Major Basilica is the name of this structure. Francis made the announcement that he has selected it as the location of his ultimate resting place in December of 2023. This is not unheard of, despite the fact that it is exceptional. There are 7 pilgrim churches in Rome, and one of them is the Basilica of St. Mary Major, which is one of the 4 major papal basilicas. From the time he became Pope, Francis has visited it more than 100 times. A total of 6 of his predecessors, including Honorius III, Nicholas IV, Pius VII, Sixtus V, Clement Alphorn, and Clement IX, have already been laid to rest in that location. Even if it is not a first of its kind, it is a throwback. What a throwback. Since the burial of Clement IX in this location in 1669, no pope has followed in his footsteps to the present day. In spite of the fact that the specifics are naturally kept under wraps, the Pope will be protected by more than just the Swiss guards, even after he has passed away. With the help of cutting-edge surveillance technologies, the Vatican and all of its inhabitants, including the deceased, are protected from harm. The Vatican will now shift its attention to a much less definite matter, which is the selection of Pope Francis' successor. Now that the Pope is going to be honored in the appropriate manner, 3 days will be spent by the College of Cardinals in preparation for a conclave, which will take place 1 week following the death of Pope Francis. Although the term suggests that secrets are kept, this was not always the case. That came after an election that had been going on for 3 years. Following the passing of Clement VI in the year 1268, the cardinals convened in the secluded village of Batterbow in order to select his appropriate successor. At a lower risk of contracting an illness, it was a convenient location. Soon after, however, the villagers became enraged. Too much time was being spent on the procedure. When they were unable to convince the cardinals to make a decision, they had to resort to extreme methods such as providing them with nothing but bread and water, or even taking the roof off of their building so that they were forced to deal with the elements. Leave immediately, please. The decision was made in September of 1271 and Gregory X was selected. A catch, however, was present. In no way was he a cardinal. In fact, he was not even a layman. When he finally arrived to the Vatican, it had been 8 months since he had left on his crusade. Thank goodness things are a great deal less problematic at the moment. The custom that had been passed down from Batterbow was codified by Gregory, who issued an order that said the cardinals would only get one meal each day if the conclave continued for more than 3 days. Keeping things a secret also became a greater priority. It was in the year 1274 that the secret papal conclave was formally constituted. Prior to that time, the cardinals were free to discuss it with whoever they desired, and Pope Pius VI instituted a secret ballot in the early 20th century. It is highly unlikely that the villagers would be able to rip off the roof of the building today. It is impossible to enter the conclave area. In addition, the cardinals have been isolated. Not only are they not permitted to view the news, but they are also not permitted to communicate with anyone via the telephone or computer. But what about these? In order to prevent signals from passing through during the most recent conclave, which took place in 2013, the Vatican constructed Faraday cages and vehicles that were equipped with communication jammers. To protect against the existence of drones that are invasive, there will most likely be an increase in the number of jammers. It is possible that these procedures appear to be excessive, but they have proven to be effective. What is the likely length of time that we will have to wait before we see the white smoke this time? The election of Pope Francis took place in a conclave that lasted only 1 day from March 12th to March 13th. This was an impressively quick process. Additionally, Benedict XV's conclave in 2005 lasted for only 1 day from the 18th to the 19th of April. On the other hand, this does not imply that there is just one round. In order for a candidate to be elected, he or she must receive a majority vote of 2/3 from the College of Cardinals. As a result of the fact that the new pope will be one of them, perhaps this is not as challenging as it was between the years 1268 and 1271. Despite the fact that it is not a prerequisite, the most recent pope who did not originate from the institution was Urban VI, who served as pope in 1378. In spite of the fact that the cardinal electors are acquainted with one another, there will still be a great deal of black smoke like this. The election of Pope Francis required a total of 5 ballots. There had been 4 previous instances in which black smoke emanated from the Vatican, which indicated that there was not yet a new pope in place. The black smoke is a mystery. What gives it its color? On the other hand, the white smoke that is used to announce the arrival of a new pope is composed of substances such as water vapor, fuel vapor, or mineral ash. It is typically composed of very small pieces of carbon. Before the iconic white smoke rises above the Vatican, an important process unfolds. Once a candidate is chosen, the College of Cardinals formally asks if he accepts his election. If he agrees, he is invited to choose a papal name. Only then is the white smoke released into the sky, signaling to the world that a new pope has been elected. Behind the scenes, the new pope is quickly dressed in the traditional white robes. Meanwhile, the senior cardinal deacon steps onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to make the historic announcement, "We have a pope." Moments later, the new pope appears on the balcony for his first public greeting and addresses the people gathered below. After this initial appearance, the pope returns to a private chapel where he meets again with the College of Cardinals. In this meeting, he thanks them for their service and formally dissolves the conclave. Soon after, the new pope selects the date for his inauguration. In the past, papal inaugurations were grand and solemn ceremonies, often involving elaborate coronations. However, recent popes, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis have all preferred simpler, more humble rituals. Moving away from the old pomp and splendor, will the next pope continue this tradition of simplicity? Or might we see a return to more elaborate celebrations? Only time will tell. For now, we bid farewell.